many debates. As a matter of fact, they've debated each other several times. So with that, let's kind of have some brief intros though, because it still has been a while since Kent and Taylor have battled it out in the debate octagon, I guess you could say. Taylor, let's start with you. A little bit about yourself briefly and a little bit about what you do over at your YouTube channel.
Sure. So I run a YouTube channel called Snake Was Right, and with my friend who's a debate coach, we run a channel called Debate Cafe. And over there at Debate Cafe, we score debates and we try and be as unbiased as possible and creationists have won debates over there before because it's about skill, not necessarily whether we agree with you. But as far as my own personal channel, I tend to do skeptic things, and I focus on source methods because that's I majored in molecular cellular developmental biology. So I'm developed a taste for having the primary source documents, and also I know a lot of biology, so I try and look at things through that lens. I came to creationism I am not a creationist, but I came to have creationism on my radar through that kind of thing. But I do tackle other topics, anything science related, especially if it pertains to public policy. But I also I just re-released a remastered version of Islam video. So I used to be one of those liberals who was like, Islam is okay, they're just being oppressed. But then I read the Quran. And I had a similar experience with the Bible. I went to a Christian school looking for God, read the Bible, became an atheist. And so that's a little bit about me.
Taylor, thank you very much for that introduction. Your channel links are in the description box. Your Snake Was Right channel, also Debate Cafe. I have seen several of the debates you host over there, and they're definitely moderated well and always done fairly. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Kent, good to have you back. How have you been? A little bit about yourself, a little bit about Dal.
Well, thank you, sir. It's good to be back. My name's Kent Hovind. I've been a Baptist preacher 48 years. I taught high school science and math 15 years in Christian schools. And this is debate number 320 for me. I've never had a class in debate. I just try to study the truth. I want to know the truth. And the truth is, there's no science behind evolution at all. Science is what we can observe. Evolution is a religion. And I'll challenge them all on that anytime. So I appreciate these guys trying to defend their faith, but I wish they would admit it's a faith. It's not science to believe you came from a rock and Colorado fit in a dot. That's not science. That's a religious belief. And you're welcome to it. But as far as public policy, get that out of the public schools. That's not science. It's a religion. Should not be taught at all. So I'm going to go to my grave teaching that the Bible is absolutely correct. God made everything in 6 days. And a big flood 4,400 years ago destroyed the world. And that explains all the geology that we see, or nearly all of it. And we have a Christian camp, a science center, and a museum here in Lenox, Alabama. Good luck finding that on a map. Come on down, visit. All right.
Okay, thank you for that introduction there, Kent. What is linked in the description box for people? I understand we're getting lots of comments saying they're enjoying these evolution debates, and so over the last at least couple years since we've been doing this evolution debate challenge, there's well over 60 or 70 to enjoy. So just click the debate playlist in the description box and you've got endless evolution debates to enjoy. So with that being said, what we're doing here in terms of the debate, does biology support evolution, is Taylor's going to start. He's going to provide his evidence in a 10-minute, up to 10-minute opening statement. We'll give Kent equal time, 10 minutes to respond. And then we're just going to jump into a free-flowing discussion where we can engage every single point one at a time. We want to make this comprehensive. We want to make it thorough. And so everybody in the chat, if you do have questions, though, for the debaters, keep the questions on topic. Tag me at Standing for Truth or at Donnie, and that way I won't miss them. Okay, Taylor, we're going to get right into the fun. And so the floor is yours whenever you're ready. 10 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. And then if you could just put my camera full screen.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to try and truncate this a little bit so that we can take it one point at a time. It's basically 1 point. So let's talk about the scientific method. The basic aim and method of science is to seek rules and principles that predict the operation of observable things. Evolution does this, creationism cannot. The proof is in the pudding. So evolution has fruits, creation does not. There are several technologies and predictions produced by evolution, none for creationism. And additionally, evolution is cross-confirmed by nuclear physics, thermodynamics, chemistry, mathematics, archaeology, geology, paleontology, comparative genomics, comparative anatomy, and tons of others that I probably missed. And its numerous predictions of biological functions, fossil record predictions, uses in technology and medicine, such as virology and genetic diseases. This theory produces real results and thus is scientific by definition. Let's see here. It appears I have had the wrong slide with this similar beginning up. Okay. Forensic science is a science, but applied to unseen events. We can use sciences to be so sure of events that have no records, that have no witnesses, that can't be reviewed, that we can convict people beyond a reasonable doubt. So what can we do to scientifically study life's history on Earth? Again, the gold standard of scientific method is prediction. So that's one thing. Let's take a look at the common ground creationists has with science. They accept evolution happens, and it did happen after the ark, but they do not accept common ancestry. So how do we know that all elephants are the same kind? How do we know all cats are the same kind? All wolves and dogs, canids? How do we know all horses are the same kinds? As declared by creationists. We never saw dogs come from wolves. We never saw speciation of elephants. We never saw triceratops come from triceratops, yet we agree that we can group them all together. So what's going on here? Creationists tried to come up with methods categorizing biblical kinds or Berrimans using comparative anatomy, but this backfired. Berrimans were declared when morphological distance clusters had larger sized gaps between them than the total size of the cluster itself. But as more fossils were discovered, the gaps shrank and the Berrimans collapsed into each other. For example, parts of the avian cluster were closer to the dromaeosaur dinosaurs than they were to other avians within the cluster. Berrimanology proved common ancestry by their own methods, so it was abandoned by this method at least was abandoned by creationists. Because they don't follow the data. They discard the data when it gives them conclusions they don't like. Other creationist methods involve nothing other than just thinking about personal experience with animals and declaring the groups to be obvious. How scientific. They literally just say they just feel like they belong in certain groups. This creates problems. Like the fact that creationists conclude animals should be in mutually contradictory groupings with the same method. That's not scientific. So they fall back on comparing anatomical structures, which is scientific, but that's literally all they have. And so we agree on this, but the question is, where do we stop comparing anatomy to be scientific? Creationist ministries declare a fossil horse Mesohippus is in the horse kind based on comparative anatomy alone. It seems obvious they're horses, right? I agree. One problem is that it shows such diversity within horse kind as to justify macroevolution. Horses evolved from three-toed animals to one-toed. That's functional design change from evolution. Equivalent to a change as drastic as humans walking on a single finger. Creationists admit that this is possible. They admit things that snakes could have easily evolved from lizards despite calling them different kinds, thus more admission of macroevolution. They also inadvertently agree that with mainstream paleontology when they declare the oldest snakes were snakes. Why is this a problem? Because the oldest snakes were identified only through vertebra fragments and lower jaw fragments, and comparing these to modern snakes. So how do they know these are even snakes and not winged beasts that their wings degraded and we no longer have the bones for them? How do they know they're snakes unless specific morphology dictates common ancestry? Why do they use comparative anatomy? And where does this method stop working? It's clearly a valid method, so they must have an answer for when it stops working scientifically, right? again, they seem to just change their minds where that limit is when transitional fossils fill in the gaps. So it's not based on any rigorous method, just whether or not they like the conclusion. Because every time you add a transitional fossil, you also have to compare that not just with the most modern, but you have to compare that with what's most similar to it. And does that follow the rule of comparative anatomy? So you get this long growing list of things that are probably related to each other. The amount of accepted variation within kinds always is larger than the gaps between them. So if the Bengal cat is related to saber-toothed tiger, why is it much more similar to things that are not in its group? Creationists don't give a reason, especially when we add in more transitional forms. Since that kind contains the same potential diversity, then they overlap with other kinds. So if the transitional forms are stuck in an existing kind, this just increases the accepted diversity range within one and shrinks the gap to non-existence, still resulting in a unified kind. Meanwhile, this relationship with a much larger morphological gap is accepted based on nothing but morphology. So what's going on here? Going back to horses, we can see these two nearly identical animals, the Mesohippus and the modern horse Equus, but their feet are completely different due to evolution admitted by the largest creationist organizations. Yet the earliest horses and the earliest tapirs, a different biblical kind, are more similar than the earliest horses are to modern horses, or the earliest tapirs are to modern tapirs. So taking the trend that we establish that these are related, these should be related by the same rules, but creationists have a double standard. They just decide, no, they're separate kinds, don't give a reason. The trend is clear and predicted by evolution. The older the ancestors are, they all converge on the same anatomy, so a common ancestor. Every creationist I've ever talked to pretty much accepts relationships like this, that all cats are from the same kind. Yet there's huge morphological diversity within them. But if we look at the oldest cats, this is a picture of the oldest cats, the oldest dogs, the oldest weasels, and another carnivore, mustelids. So, but they all are the exact same morphology. They all converge being the same thing. So at the roots of the tree, they're more similar than the branches are to each other. This is just a bigger version of this, a bear dog. And so bears are included in this. Seals too. And yet we see the amount of diversity needed within dogs. Okay. So how is a creationist supposed to tell what's related? Are these related? Are these related? Are these related? This gap right here within dogs is larger than the gap between these. So using the same method, we should be able to conclude that these are related. So I'm interested to discuss the methodology used there. I do have one other point regarding genetics, but we'll take it one point at a time.
Taylor, thank you for the opening statement. And we're now going to hand it over to Kent, who also gets 10 minutes. And then we'll jump into some back and forth discussion. Kent, floor is yours, 10 minutes.
Well, thank you. It's interesting. He keeps using the word related. You don't know anything is related. Okay. Is my dog related to the neighbor's dog? I don't know. My dog's probably related to its mother and father. So I'd be cautious of using that word related so freely, Taylor. Science, I agree. Science is what we know, what we can observe, what we can test. We can see that dogs produce dogs. That's been observed for thousands of years. People have been trying to breed dogs to get special breeds that do something that they want, better hunting dogs or lap dogs or whatever they want. But they always get a dog, and there seems to be a limit. But you guys want to put dogs on the same family tree as a strawberry. And if I would ask you, I know you would answer, yes, you believe a dog is related to a strawberry. I think that is not only not science, I think that's just plain dumb. But you can believe that if you wish, but that's a religion. That's not part of science. We don't ever see strawberries produce non-strawberries. We don't ever see dogs produce non-dogs. But you guys put them all on the tree of life with the dog coming from an amoeba or a single-celled creature of some kind. And you say it's related to, let's see, the frog, the butterfly, the bird, the octopus, people. I accept the fact that cows can jump. There's a rodeo in Texas where they ride cows and they jump them. Got a video footage. I won't show the video here, but there's a cow jumping over a 6-foot fence. So I believe if you gave that cow vitamins and took it to the gym, someday it could work. It could jump over the moon. This is the logic you guys have. You see variations in the cat kind, and there certainly are variations in the cat kind and the dog kind. And then you jump to the wild conclusion that if we had enough time, the cats are related to blueberries and mosquitoes. I don't know how. I feel like I'm talking colors to a blind man, but you guys want to believe this so badly. It's because it eliminates God in your life, or for now anyway, till Judgment Day. So I accept the fact that cows can jump, but they will never jump over the moon. I accept the fact that we can get varieties of cows, but they will never be a non-cow. There's a limit how high cows can jump. Have they reached the limit? I don't know. 6 foot's pretty high, but maybe they'll get 6'1" someday. But they're not going to jump over the moon, okay? There are 16 common cattle breeds. Some people say as many as 400 cattle breeds. Farmers have been trying for centuries to get cows to do something, a particular purpose, like more milk or more beef or stand the heat better, whatever. But they're always cow. They're stuck in the cow kind. And that's all you ever get. This is science. It would be science to say all the dairy breeds and all the beef breeds had a common ancestor. I think that could be a logical conclusion from what we can observe. Science is what we observe. We observe cows always produce cows. You get varieties, and you can select a trait they already have. I took my students to Kankakee, Illinois, to the farm where they had the cow that gave the most milk that year, 100 pounds a day. Utterly ridiculous. That cow could barely walk. It certainly wouldn't survive in nature, but it's pretty handy to give 100 pounds of milk a day if you want milk and you're a farmer, a dairy farmer. Most of the breeds that they get of cows would not survive in nature. Most of the breeds of dogs would not survive. I was at the store yesterday and a family walked in holding a little bitty toy chihuahua. The chihuahua's dumb enough. This is a toy chihuahua. I mean, completely used. It wouldn't last 10 seconds in the woods. The sparrows would eat it, okay? This thing, but it's still a dog, and it's limited. There are 200, this guy says 250 breeds of cows. Some say 400. Doesn't matter. They're still cow. That doesn't prove cows are related to bananas. I wish you guys could see how dumb your religion is when facing real science. Real science says cows make cows, but you want to put cows on the family tree with birds and butterflies and mosquitoes and octopus and people. This is not science. There are 6 types of corn. Let's see, 200 varieties of wheat. Okay, I believe that. 4,000 varieties of potatoes. I believe that. Lions and leopards and might have had a common ancestor, but that's not evolution. And see, they're still a cat. That's all we've ever. And some are interfertile. They get tigons and ligers, depending which is the male and the female. The buffalo and the bison can crossbreed. Might have had a common ancestor. The sheep and the goat can crossbreed, but the sheep and the pine tree cannot. Okay, but you guys have sheep and pine trees on your tree, family tree, with them connected. Here they crossed a whalpin, made a whalpin with a whale to a killer whale, false killer whale, to a bottlenose dolphin. The camel can crossbreed with the llama, get a cama. There's a jaguar with a lion. See, yes, the Bible says they will bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. We have 35 kinds of chickens, varieties of chickens in our Dinosaur Adventureland farm here. They might have had a common ancestor called a chicken. But you guys want to look at the different kinds of chickens and say, oh, they're related to elephants. And you really do believe chickens are related to elephants. I know you do. That's what your religion teaches, and you're sworn to it. There are, 225 varieties of owls. Might have had a common ancestor. 8 varieties of bears come from a bear. But see, they always bring forth after their kind. Some farmers decided to take a mustard plant and keep breeding them until they get bigger flowers or bigger roots or bigger, ended up with all these varieties from a common mustard plant. They had a common ancestor called the mustard plant. You end up with kale, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, etc. It's still a plant. And all they did was select a certain trait that already existed. They didn't get a plant that could fly or give milk. They got a plant. And all we can do is select an existing trait. I've covered this so many times, I don't know why Taylor doesn't get it, doesn't want to get it, I guess. They did selective breeding on sugar beets during the war, World War II, to try to increase the sugar content to supply for the troops fighting the war. They worked and worked, and they got sugar beets to go from 6% to 17% sugar. They ran into a brick wall. They couldn't get past 17%, and it's still a sugar beet. They never turned into a cow or a whale or a fish. It's still a sugar beet. And all they did was increase the sugar, and it already had sugar in it. You guys, I don't know how you don't get it, okay? They bring forth after their kind. So anyway, in my seminar, I cover all this kind of stuff of evidence for evolution does not exist. This evolution theory teaches the earth began as a hot ball of rock. Let's see. People can't see the truth. That's right. Okay. God says he made the world, and he built it under the water. It was cold, cool. It was able to withstand liquid water, so less than 212 degrees. But the textbook says it started off as a hot ball of rock. Earth formed, the surface was hot. Large pools of bubbling lava. Earth was formed, it was 4.6 billion years ago. Very different. It was a hot ball of rock. You believe, you told me before we started this debate tonight, Taylor, that the whole state of Colorado fit in a dot, smaller than a period. Well, you didn't say smaller than a period. You say, oh, I have to understand science. I do understand science. That's not science. That's a religious belief. You believe you could fit Colorado into a dot. Taylor, I'll give you $100 if you can squeeze a gallon of water into a dot. Just a gallon of water, not the whole state of Colorado, okay? Earth began as a hot ball of rock. This is what the books teach our kids. Earth was a hot ball of rock, and then it cooled down, and 4.5 billion years ago, Earth cooled down, and it rained on the rocks and turned them into chemical soup. This is the stuff that's taught in the schools. This isn't science. All the rocks melted. Hot ball of rock orbiting the sun. Incredibly hot, liquid magma, yep. And then Earth was a hot ball of rock 4.5 billion years ago. All the books teach this, that teach on this topic. This is pure baloney. This is propaganda. This is evil. This is stupid. Didn't happen. You can believe that if you wish, but I want to get to something else here. You have to go not only from nothing, creating everything with the Big Bang, then the Earth cooling down into a rock and raining on the rocks, making soup, and the soup coming alive 4.6 billion years ago. We all came from cosmic soup, primordial soup. This is what they teach. Then you got to get this soup to come alive and be able to learn to reproduce itself. So to going from just being alive is a major step. Alive, being able to reproduce, now that's another major step. I wish you guys could see there is no science behind any of this. I got plenty of stuff, but I got 1 minute left. Let's see, right here. Okay, here's the obstacles you guys have to overcome for your theory. To get from nothing to having time, space, and matter. That's a giant leap of faith. That's not science. It's not observable, okay? From non-living matter to get to a living cell. That's another leap of faith. There's no science for that. To get from a living cell to a cell able to reproduce, that's not science, okay? From a living cell able to reproduce something other than its kind. That's not science. We don't observe that. From a living cell that's able to reproduce, becoming multicellular. That's not science. Nobody sees that. Nothing to matter has never been observed. It's not part of science. Giant leap that non-living life has never been observed. Non-living to life, it cannot be considered part of science. To go from life to replicating life, that's never been observed. Giant leap from replicating life to being able to produce something other than its kind. Cows always make cows, without exception. Farmers count on that. It's not part of science. Going from single-celled life to multicellular has never been observed. If you want to talk about the ones that join together in colonies, we can talk about that if you'd like. But I just wish you guys would admit you believe, capital B, you believe in evolution. It is not science. I object to you calling it science. It's a religion in every sense of the word. Science, what we observe. We observe cows make cows. We do not observe cows coming from an amoeba and being related to a raspberry. Thank you.
Okay, Kent, thank you so much for that 10-minute opening statement. Gentlemen, Snake and Dr. Dino, that concludes the opening statements for this debate. To the audience, I am all caught up on questions, so please continue sending in your questions and making sure to tag me, also telling me who the question is for. Okay, Kent just ended with his opening statement, so Taylor, let's hand it over to you and give you the opportunity to pick the first topic or pick the first point for us to engage. Go ahead.
So, my opening was about how creationists use comparative anatomy and how they arbitrarily decide where and when to stop using it. So, Kent mentioned mustard plants. These are all the different morphologies created from wild mustard. It's not just a bigger flower. It's very different. And even this, we get highly ordered systems without any intelligent design. So the question is, and I showed a bunch of creationist research in the beginning too, where they said that hybridization was also part of how you tell things are related. So all the plants I just showed you can hybridize. So they have completely different morphologies based on modifying an original common morphology. So my question is, where do we stop applying comparative anatomy?
Well, comparative anatomy of different creatures, finding similarities, like I've got 2 bones in my wrist and the whale has 2 bones in his flipper, that does not prove common ancestry. I don't know, you guys cannot.
But why are you going from human to whale? Why not human to something that's more similar to a human?
Even things that are similar doesn't prove a relationship. Humans and cats both have 2 bones in the forelimb. It might prove a common designer, because that's a good design that works. There's a lot of cars and trucks that have an A-frame on the front so the wheel can bounce up and down while you're turning at the same time. That's a good design. It works good. Doesn't prove that's not related. You keep using that word related. That's not science. You believe they're related. You don't know that. It's a good design. It's in a court of law, in an honest court of law, both sides, creation and evolution, would have to admit, we believe it was designed this way, you believe it evolved that way. You don't observe you don't observe a cat turning into a human and get the same arm bones. We observe humans make babies all the time and they come out as human. We observe cats make babies.
No one thinks cats evolved into humans. And evolution has beaten creation in court dozens of times.
I never said, Taylor, don't put words in my mouth. I never said they did. You believe cats and humans are related to a common ancestor. No, I did not.
You said cat turning into a human.
Listen to me. Do you believe cats and humans have a common ancestor?
Yes, that's different from a cat turning into a human.
Okay. Whatever that ancestor was, did it turn into a cat and a human, the common ancestor? You believe that?
Yep. So are all cats, did they have a common ancestor?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, so why don't you know?
There's a lot of things I don't know. I don't know the square root of,
that's very clear. So do you know why so many creationists and organizations publish material on trying to figure out what animals were on the ark?
I'm not part of any other creationist organization. Are you?
I didn't ask that. Do you know why they do that?
Well, they can study whatever they like. I don't care what people study.
I'm asking if you know why.
No.
So yes or no?
What does this have to do with the debate tonight? No,
okay,
I don't know
so
why.
You don't know why. Okay, that's because you believe in the Bible and the ark story. You believe that there were a certain number of animals on the ark. There's millions of species, so we have to be able to fit enough species on the ark. So some of them have to be related. That's why I'm asking that question.
Well, the topic of the debate tonight is not could Noah fit all the animals on the ark. It's does biology support evolution?
And what I'm doing is showing you that you need to be able to have thousands of these species be related for your biblical story to be true. And you're just obscuring that because my evidence is that comparative anatomy works, creationists use it, but they can't tell me where it stops working. And the theory of evolution predicts fossils based on having common ancestry, which means that there doesn't seem to be the limit that you think is on comparative anatomy.
Well, I don't think you're going to find a fossil that would work as evidence for anything in a court of law. As I said many times, all you could prove is it died. You don't know it had any children.
I can cite dozens of court cases where it does.
So you could find a fossil, and from those bones, you could prove this one had children that were different than itself.
I can prove that it is a child.
Can you prove that the fossil...
It had parents. And you think parents are similar to the child, right?
You are muddying the water purposely here. The family tree goes from parent to child You cannot prove that fossil had any children, can you?
I don't need to. It is a child, so it had parents that were similar to it.
Bingo.
We have the
All
child. You're
animals-
saying I can't
all
prove it had a
animals.
child, but we have the child.
Okay.
We also have
if you have-
fossils that are in the process of giving birth or having
want-
eggs. So yes, we can
you want
actually
that-
prove that.
you want to say because this child had parents, you don't know that the parents were different than the child either. Okay. You don't
All
know that
parents
any
are
bones
different
you
from
found-
all children.
Okay. You don't know that any bones you found in the dirt are related to any other particular bones you find in the dirt. You can imagine that. But you don't know they had any children, and you're deliberately muddying the water and avoiding the question because you're wrong.
Why would we assume that members of the same species are not related to it?
Why do you
to
use the
each
word
other?
related again? Okay. Related. Members are all
Because
the
we're
dogs
talking
and
about-
wolves related?
Because we're talking about common ancestry. That's
Okay.
why.
If you want to switch the topic of the debate to Noah's Ark, we certainly can. There's a website called baraminology.com. They do studies on this and say the baramin is biblical kind. They think they were
Right.
probably.
I asked you why they do that. And they use comparative anatomy. So I'm asking you,
I'm trying.
where's
I'm trying
the
to
limit
answer.
on that?
Donnie, shut off his mic when I'm answering because he keeps interrupting. Okay.
Go
Now,
ahead, Ken.
I think the 8,000 kinds of animals coming off the ark, developing into the thousands of species, which you mentioned, I don't mention species, is possible. But you believe all the varieties of animals, all the millions of species, came from a rock, don't you? Go ahead.
Nope. That's what you believe.
I showed you right from your Nature magazine and everything else, a hot ball of rock. Was the Earth a hot ball of rock that cooled down and developed in a hard rocky crust, and life got started from the rock? Do you believe
Yeah,
that?
there's other chemicals other than rocks. So you mentioned the limit being cows jumping over. Well, you've mentioned in other debates cows jumping over the moon, dogs the size of Texas, but you didn't mention any limits that would prevent any of the fossils that I showed being related, even though we know those changes can occur because we observe them today.
I'll say it again. Maybe you'll get it this time. You do not know any fossil had children, do you?
Yes, we do.
You do?
That's a lie.
Please
You yourself have shown fossils giving birth.
Were they coming out of the mother as the same kind? I mean, were the fish producing fish or were the fish producing birds?
Mm-hmm. They're producing. You're lying. You think that you're lying about evolution right now. And I love your audience laughing at your lies. There is no point in evolution where a fish gave birth to a bird. So why do you repeat those lies?
Listen, focus, Daniel-san. Did the fish fossil that they found giving birth, was it giving birth to another fish of the similar kind?
Yes, and they're slightly
Bingo.
different.
Why don't you get it?
Yeah.
But you think if they did that for millions of generations, it would turn to something other than they showed the family trees.
Yes.
They've got the fish related to the pine trees.
Populations change over generations.
Where's the evidence for this? That's not science.
We see
You
that
believe
today.
that?
We see that today. Stop lying.
I'm not lying. Stop calling me a liar.
You,
now the
you-
changes.
you
that
are
we
a
see-
liar. That's
Okay,
what
I'm
you do.
calling you stupid. Okay, how do you like being called stupid? Now listen.
It's not true.
It fits perfectly. Wear that shoe. Okay. The changes that we see are limited. That's all we've observed. We've observed 400 kinds of cows produced from a cow. They're still cow, but you believe a cow and a strawberry are related, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where's the evidence for that?
The evidence is I've given you the evidence. We have comparative anatomy. It works within creationism, but you guys have an arbitrary cutoff and you say there's a limit there. What is the limit? We know
Where's
that the size, shape, location, orientation, and number of bones can change in populations. And it's not, we don't need to know that a fossil had a child. We know it's part of a population and we know populations change. And we can predict those changes with evolution. That's science. That's how science works. That's why you're a liar.
You said a moment ago that the cow and the strawberry are related. What's the anatomy of a strawberry compared to a cow? How would they relate?
Well, you wouldn't compare a strawberry and a cow. You
This
compare
chart I'm
strawberries
showing-
to other plants.
Okay,
You
this
compare
chart
those
shows
plants to
a
earlier plants.
here we got a
You
ladybug and a
keep
worm.
comparing them to
Well,
earlier.
I'm
and
scared.
earlier
Okay,
plants.
I'm going to jump in. Snake, if you could reiterate whatever question you want Kent to answer, reiterate it without any interrupting. Then we're going to give Kent as much time as he needs to basically answer it uninterrupted as well. And go ahead, Snake.
Well, he can't answer it because he doesn't know. I'm asking for a limitation on what comparative anatomy is. He tried to avoid taking responsibility for comparative anatomy, even though his entire worldview requires that thousands of species be related. So the whole point is, how do we study things that we haven't directly observed? Kent, have you observed your God creating?
No, that's why I admit mine's a religion, and you haven't observed evolution. You should admit yours is a religion too, but you won't do it.
It's not a religion, it's a science.
Then show me a cow coming from a non-cow or producing a non-cow.
Cows
Show me
produce
any
different cows. We know populations change. Based on evolution, we can predict what the changes were in life's history in the fossils. That means it's science by definition.
You're not going to get this, but fossils, you cannot prove that fossil had any children.
It's part of a population. We don't need to prove they had children.
No, do you see do the herds of buffalo slowly produce something other than buffalo? Do the swarms of mosquitoes?
They slowly produce different buffalo.
Do the swarms of mosquitoes slowly become something non-mosquito? Because there's a population.
No, they're mosquitoes today.
Right, bingo. 339 recognized breeds of dogs, most of which would not survive in the world. Man has selected a particular trait that they like some that are especially dumb and they get a pug, like my wife's dog. Some want some that are big and they get the Great Dane. But they're still dog. That's what we observe. That's been seen. We do not observe a banana being related to a dog, a wolf, or a coyote.
And we don't observe God creating anything.
And I admit mine's a religion. Why don't you admit yours is a religion?
Do you think that we should teach science in schools?
Yes, I think we should exclude religion. Evolution should not be taught in public schools.
So if a particular theory is able to predict the natural world, is that scientific?
Well, if you want it, I'd be careful going down that slippery slope. I could say, well, the natural world could have been predicted. We could predict it must have been a designer because it's so complex. We could therefore get creation in. I predict, without even seeing who did it, somebody made this ink pen. I bet this has a designer. I don't know where, but I bet there is one. So
That's
I think if you look
prediction.
at a single cell,
you already know people make pens.
We already know everything complex has a designer. One cell in your body has a designer.
Prove it. You can't witness it. And you have no theory that can predict things about the natural world. So the theory would be everything has a designer. What can you discover from that theory? Nothing. The theory of evolution is we have common ancestry, and we've discovered fossils based on that, and we can track viral evolution based on that. We can cure diseases based on that. So it's a science.
Well, I don't know who taught you that, but you need to get your money back. Okay.
I put it in my
opening. I think there's been some healthy interruptions, which is fine. But let's now. So, Snake, you made your points. Kent will allow you to respond, and we'll try and go as uninterrupted as possible. Go ahead, Kent.
Well, I would say it for the 10,000th time. What we observe is dogs produce dogs always. If you wish to believe dogs and broccoli are related, that's fine. You can believe whatever you want to believe. You can believe in the abominable snowman and fairy tales, etc. But evolution is not science. It's not observed. What we see, 40 species of wolf, I would say it's logical to say they had a common ancestor called a wolf. But that's not logical to say keep going back and magnify those changes. And a wolf came from a protozoa, which came from a dot of nothing exploding. It's not science. It's a religious belief to believe that dogs and bananas are related. But you believe that. It's not science. It's probably logical, and I think it's reasonable to assume that all the dogs and wolves and coyotes had a common ancestor. I couldn't prove that. I think we can see dogs produce dogs, and that can be observed. 19 subspecies of coyote probably had a common ancestor. But you want to take this evidence of variations within the coyotes, variations within the wolves, and you want me to pay to have all the students taught. That proves coyotes are related to strawberries. That's stupid. Take it away.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Even though it actually creates and produces scientific discoveries, making it science by definition. I put it up here. This is the fundamental of science. Observe nature, seek rules and principles that explain or predict its operation. So if I can do that with any particular theory, I am doing science. You say that I just want it to be true. Meanwhile, you just want it to be not true for your book so you can push your religion in schools.
First, I'm not pushing my religion in schools, okay? You guys are pushing your religion in schools, okay? And put your definition up there. You can observe nature. Okay, let's observe. What has man observed for thousands of years? Cows make cows, dogs make dogs, pine trees make baby pine trees. That we've observed. Let's seek rules to explain it. No,
you're leaving something out.
No, I think, okay, observe rules and then seek rules or principles which explain or predict its operation.
No, you're leaving something out about what we observe.
I think we can predict that must be a genetic code that produces after its kind. Well, that's what the Bible says. Okay, let me read the whole thing.
Creationism did not predict that.
Because there's a little crosstalk, I can't fully hear both sides finishing their argument. So, Kent, if you want to finish your sentence there, then Taylor will throw it back to you.
I will read the scientific method. Put it back up there, Taylor. Okay, if you would. The scientific method, if I left something out, I apologize. Quote, the basic aim and method of inquiry identified here can be seen as a theme running through the next 2 millennia of reflection on the correct way to seek after knowledge. Carefully observe nature and then seek rules or principles which explain or predict its operation. End quote. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and the funny man sitting there. Okay, I read it all. Oh, I'm sorry, scientific method. What we observe is dogs produce dogs, cows produce cows, cats produce cats. There are variations, but they always are observable as the same kind. We observe that cows.
What does that mean?
Well, we observe that cows and pine trees cannot crossbreed. There must be some kind of genetic code that prevents this. So anything beyond what we observe and study and test is not science.
Okay, so there are no foxes that are related then because they can't interbreed.
No foxes that are related?
Correct.
I think foxes have babies all the time.
Chromosomes and can't interbreed.
So all the foxes in the world are extinct? They can't breed?
The different species of foxes all have different chromosomes and can't interbreed.
Well, let's see. There are 34 chromosomes in the red fox. There are 34 chromosomes in the sunflower. Can the fox and the sunflower interbreed?
No. Why are you asking that? I'm talking about foxes.
You got them on a family tree as the same kind. I mean, all have a common ancestor. Let me get to more stuff on foxes.
You said they're the same kind if they can interbreed, but that's not true because foxes are the same kind.
We have quite a few foxes stuffed and mounted in our museum here. I think there are 37.
No one cares.
I care. Anybody else care? Who cares? Hey, I'm glad you're the only one that doesn't care. But we have a lot of.
I've been trying to make a point for a little bit.
Well, there are 37 different species, varieties of foxes. They might have had a common ancestor. I don't know. But I know they didn't have an ancestor with a strawberry. That I know.
How do you know that?
Show me. That's not science. You can believe that. You believe it. I know.
How do you know where they stop being related? So you can say foxes are related, coyotes are related, wolves are related, dogs are related. By the way, my Chihuahua survived on the streets for a long time. So your whole thing about them not being able to survive in nature is bupkis. Yeah, that's a funny word, isn't it? The point is, where do you stop making those comparisons? Because the further we can keep going back through the fossil record, and they're still similar. The fossil dogs are just as similar to wolves as modern dogs are.
Bingo.
And the fossil canids are just as similar to wolves as dogs are to wolves. So where do we stop making those comparisons?
Well, first place, I don't go around comparing. I don't do that. But you got a family tree with all the foxes and wolves related to a strawberry. That is what's not science. Your family trees, I would agree. Maybe the fossils we find are very similar, maybe even identical to some dogs alive today, or wolves or coyotes. I think it'd be logical to say, this is a wolf we just found. We found the fossils of a wolf. But you see the fossil of a wolf or a fossil of a dog and say, see, that proves they all came from an amoeba.
Nope.
That's what's not science.
Nope. It's the fact that we find similar fossils that bridge every gap. And when we say, maybe they're all related, we can fill in those gaps that we do have.
Well, again, filling
Yeah,
in a gap.
so-
Here they have a
So
protozoa.
stop comparing protozoa to humans, and maybe compare protozoa to other single cells.
Okay, does this textbook teach the kids that the protozoa gradually, slowly turned into a human?
Nope.
This textbook is not teaching that.
Correct. You don't understand how branches of evolution work, apparently, because the protozoa branched off. It did not keep going to human. What happened was it branched off of other single cells, and some of those other single cells became multicellular. As I proved to you last debate, you had no counter to that. We've observed single cells evolving multicellularity. You said multiple times you'd look into it. You didn't.
I'm ready now tonight. Is that what you want to talk about tonight, Taylor? I'm ready for this one tonight.
Sure. We
Okay.
still haven't gotten anywhere on multicellularity, or sorry, on comparative anatomy.
Well, comparative anatomy, the fact that there are similar anatomical structures of creatures would prove a common designer.
No, it
You know,
doesn't.
the Honda hubcaps on an Accord will fit on a Civic. Wow. Same designer.
Except you can make zero useful predictions or novel predictions or predictions at all using that system. With the system of evolution, I can make predictions that lead to scientific discoveries, thus making it scientific by definition. You haven't responded to that?
All right, let me respond to it.
And you're avoiding comparative anatomy, even though you know it's necessary for your worldview, because you know as soon as you answer my questions, it's going to prove my point that you can't draw any line in comparative anatomy.
We can draw lots of lines. You can draw the lines on paper you want. That's all these charts are, is a bunch of lines drawn on paper.
That's not what I meant.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and do this, gentlemen. Okay, so Taylor, take 30 seconds for a final word on comparative anatomy and this specific point. Kent, you take 30 seconds as well, uninterrupted, for a final word on this specific topic. And then we're going to move to the single to multi-celled evolution argument. We'll make that point 2 or topic 2. So go ahead, Taylor, final word on this topic, and then we'll hand it to Kent, and then we'll move on to topic 2. Go ahead.
So I pretty much just made that point, is there is no hard limit we can put on comparative anatomy. We know that it's necessary for creationism as a worldview. They arbitrarily put a limiter on comparative anatomy wherever they kind of feel like it, and literally they say this in their papers. So we can perform scientific processes on things that we didn't observe. It's kind of like forensics. And so for all the reasons I just gave, we can predict the contents of the earth using evolution. You can't. Thus, it's a science.
Okay, Taylor, thank you very much for the final word on comparative anatomy. We'll give Kent his response, final word as well. And then, Taylor, we're going to hand it back to you for topic 2, single to multi-celled evolution. Take a couple minutes to make your case for that, and then we'll give Kent a response. But for now, Kent, feel free, have a final word on comparative anatomy.
All right, thank you. I have a room full of textbooks, biology textbooks, a whole shelf full of them here, case of them. They do teach comparative anatomy provides further evidence of evolution. The commonality, as in the common anatomy, suggests that these and other vertebrate animals are all related. They probably evolved from a common ancestor. This is flat, plain stupid. It could easily prove a common designer. I think you'll find all the cars coming off the assembly line in Honda plants have an H on them someplace. They have some commonality. I think you find they have round tires. I think you find they have, some kind of engine to propel it, some kind of steering system, some kind of suspension system. Sure, there are similarities because of a common designer, a common need. I think there are similarities in lots of different creatures alive today because the same God designed them. Because they need to do the same thing, like move around, like twist your hand. Like cat needs to twist his paw around, I need to twist my hand around, so we got 2 bones and radius and ulna. It works great. But you think all that came from a rock for no reason with no designer. I think that's silly, but you're welcome to keep your silly religion. I just don't think you should call it science. It's not science to say a cat and a dog, or a cat and a human are related. This is fairy tale stuff. They make these family trees and push it off as science, saying the human and the bird and the strawberry have a common ancestor. I don't think that's common sense. They're welcome to believe it. I think it's silly, but they have a shark related to a starfish. What's the commonality there between a shark and a starfish? The starfish doesn't have any bones, neither does the octopus. I've been doing a whole series every Friday night on how making babies, how different animals make babies. None of the evolutionists have answered any of my questions. How did this process evolve? Some of them are incredibly complex. We did the seahorse last Friday. Why don't you guys ever answer the question? Why are you so afraid of? It can't be done. It had to be designed. If I said, explain this, ink pen, but you can't use man as your answer, how did this come to be? You can't use man as you can't use a designer. How did it come to be? Give me a naturalistic explanation for an ink pen. It can't be done. It can't be done, a naturalistic explanation for any of the life forms we see on the planet today. Had to have a designer. I can't prove that. You can't prove that it's wrong either, but you sure can't give a logical explanation for how any of the animals came about from a hot dot of soup coming out of the primordial soup. Anyway, so go ahead. Tell me how you think a shark and an octopus are related. Octopus don't have bones. One has 8 limbs. One has none. Well, no arms. You think a shark and an octopus are related? Tell me why and tell me how that happened. They got a line on paper.
And before you respond, Taylor, if you want to answer that question, but if you also want to bring it around back to the single to multi-celled evolution topic too, go ahead, but feel free to respond to whatever you'd like to.
So sharks are fish, and we can track fish fossils down to when fish didn't have bones. That's around where fish and other mollusks and octopus branched when they had no bones. But we can show that bones evolved from non-bony fish, and really all bones are modifications of the original teeth and jaw bones. But what Kent does is lie and compare shark and octopus instead of compare shark to fish and fish to other fish, and follow it down the line and compare octopus to other mollusks and find out where those lines converge, which evolution predicts and we find in the fossil record, making it a science by definition.
Kent, go ahead if you'd like to respond.
Well, he keeps saying it makes it science. It does not make it science. Science is what we can observe and study and test. Let's do it again in the laboratory. Make a non-bony fish turn to a bony fish. Let's see it. Do it in the laboratory. I'd like to see that. I hear they've got a chart showing that the turtles and the snakes and the birds and the cats have a common ancestor. They drew lines on paper. Would you please do some science, do an experiment, follow the rules of science, show me observation that would say a bird came from anything other than a bird. All we've seen is birds make baby birds. We don't see birds and snakes related, but they got a line on paper connecting them here. Man, got to be true. It's in a science book. This is propaganda is all it is. Propaganda, it's not science. The protozoa slowly branching over millions of generations and coming out as a human is not science. That's religion. All you can see is what you drew a bunch of lines on paper that the single-celled creature turned into everything today. I just resent that being taught. So single-celled, going from single-celled to multicellular, he thinks it happened with this creature I'll call up right here. A single-celled creature is not simple, by the way. But this is the one he used last time and said I didn't have an answer for it. Well, I'm ready now. Here's the one he said. Yeah. You believe, I think you made it pretty clear, that you believe that, coming up right here, single-celled cooperated, became multicellular. Okay. Trichoplax is a few thousand cells, one of the simplest or smallest, least complex of the multicellular organisms. Trichoplex, okay? Let's see. But you believe, this is one you had right here, in the Plecozoa family.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a question for Donnie real quick. Are we going to have closing statements, and how much time do we have left?
Yes, we will have closing statements. Discussion portion, we've got a decent amount of time to cover all the topics. And so, of course, we'll have those closing statements to address anything that we feel might be left hanging, Taylor. So no worries.
And how much time do we have left?
For the discussion, I'd say about another 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Kent. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Well, this is the one you used last time, that you said this creature is a single-celled creature and becomes multicellular. And you are mistaken, okay? it clusters together to do for common defense in the presence of certain predators, but then it goes right back to single cellular. There's a long article in Nature magazine, which I read carefully, about this experimental evolution of alternating uni and multicellular life cycle. It alternates back and forth from unicellular, it clusters together. Read the article carefully. It tells about their transition to multicellular. They think they use it as evidence because that's the best they've got. All you get are clusters, okay? Transition to multicellular was one of the few major events in life's history that created new opportunities. But it remains a challenge within evolutionary biology. During one of its life cycles, they naturally cluster up, then go back to single cells. The Nature article only claims it's a cluster and never claims it became a multicellular organism, because it did not. It became a cluster to fight off the predator they induced into the system. That's all it did. So, but see, if you could find one that's able to go from single cell to multicellular, which they haven't yet, that wouldn't prove it happened in the past in nature. That would prove the creature might have been designed to do that in the presence of a predator. So it's not evidence that it happened in nature. Your human body probably has 100 trillion cells, each one more complex than the space shuttle. To say that it happened by chance, I think, is silly. Dreaming. Didn't happen, but go ahead.
Okay, so why did you read the article and not the actual paper it's from? That would have clued you into what's actually going on here. So when they say alternating phases that alternate between uni and multicellular, you're dead wrong about your conclusions there. It does not go back and forth between uni and multicellular. It stays multicellular and has unicellular babies that grow up to be multicellular and stay multicellular forever. So the alternating part is that it has babies that are unicellular that become multicellular. So you need to go back and do your research better this time.
No, think about it. Humans are born already multicellular. You're saying this thing goes back to single cellular. It produces single cell babies that then cluster together to make another multicellular creature. Why don't they have a multicellular baby?
Because very few humans don't have multicellular babies. Do you see what's on my screen right now? It says, like most multicellular organisms, this species of algae, seen reinhardtii, possesses a life history that alternates between uni and multicellular stages. Like most multicellular organisms, most extant multicellular organisms, including us. So if you read the actual paper, you would have known that, instead of reading an article about it.
So is this algae evidence that it happened long ago and far away in nature? I mean, this is happening today.
It's certainly evidence.
What?
Yes, it is evidence. Yes, because, okay, what do we need to do for a thing that we haven't directly observed? We can collect evidence that we don't need to have a actual video of it happening. We can still have evidence that it happened. So the fact that it's possible in organisms, that's great evidence.
So therefore, it should be taught to all the students as scientifically proven that all life forms have a common ancestor, because this algae is able to cluster together to fight off an enemy, and then it goes back to producing single cellular babies, which then cluster together again.
They don't cluster together, they stay together. They aren't coming together from different parents. They all stay together. They are bound together in a single body, and they stay like that.
Okay, so does this cluster of algae that bond together then develop a uterus?
No.
So each of them are still individual cells in a cluster, like a herd of buffalo.
But they develop.
The herd of buffalo does not produce a herd of buffalo. The herd is a bunch of individual buffalo.
Yeah.
And they produce baby buffalo. So you're saying this cluster of these algae produce single cell babies, and then they cluster together again. This is nothing but a herd of buffalo.
No, they grow. The single cell splits a bunch of times and grows a body. And they have different cells within it that have different jobs within the body. So that's cell differentiation. So the point being is that evolution can create complexity and add information. And that's one piece of evidence. The other is that...
Hold it. How did you tie that in? Evolution can create complexity and add information? Show me an example of that.
We just
You're
went
saying
over it.
this
You do you
algae,
think that a multicellular body is not adding information from having unicellular ancestors?
is it still an algae?
But it's added information.
So this is proof that the algae can turn into an elephant over millions of generations.
It's proof that evolution can add information, and that generations change drastically between but across time. So elephants don't come from algae. Elephants come from other mammals. So mammals can change. We know this. So what about the first mammals? Could that have changed from something else? That's the question you've been avoiding all night.
Well, hold it. To ask me, could it have happened? You just demonstrated it's a religious belief. Show me the evidence of it happening. That would be science.
We know it can happen.
Well,
we know, but we also know that we can use science, that if science predicts certain things about the natural world, that means it's a scientific theory. So based on knowledge we have about changing populations, we can predict, fossils are going to change too throughout time. And we can predict the shape and location of these fossils really well. So whatever we're doing to predict this has some sort of scientific truth to it. That's how science works.
Obviously, you've been brainwashed into believing the geologic column exists and the layers mean something. All of the layers of the Earth were formed in 1 year. There's no such thing as a geologic column. You don't predict where it found it.
Did you observe that?
I've observed petrified trees standing up, connecting all the layers. I think it's logical
connecting
science.
Connecting all the layers? No, they only connect very closely, close temporally layers.
Well, I'm going to jump in, gentlemen, because if you want to go back to that slide, if we are going to move on to another topic like the geologic column, I'd like to get now, since that was topic 2, single to multi-celled evolution, I'd like to get a 30-second to minute concluding statement again on that one. And so we've gone comparative anatomy, we've gone the Cladomonas example, or with the amoeba. So Snake, let's start with you. Take 30 seconds to a minute in terms of concluding that topic. Then we'll do the same for Kent, and then we'll move to another topic. It looks like you guys wanted to go into geologic column. So Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah. So like every person I've debated on this, they haven't actually read the source material for this. Here, looks like it's a little bit distorted there. They haven't actually read the source material for this. And so if you actually did that, you'd see that the concerns that you brought up are actually addressed in the paper. So it's clear that Kent has no idea what he's talking about on this topic.
Read your slide on the screen, Taylor. It has a life history that alternates between uni and multicellular stages.
Read the first part of that sentence. Like most extant multicellular organisms.
I don't alternate back and forth. I don't alternate back. I'm multicellular, have been for a long time. I don't alternate back and forth. You're claiming that this algae is evidence that it happened. You don't know that the fact that they can do it today does not prove it happened millions of years ago. They're still alive today. So each one of these individuals is incredibly complex. Little flagella on there allow it to swim through the water or whatever medium it's in. So I think it's dreaming to say this is evidence for evolution. It's evidence of amazing design, in my opinion. Go ahead.
Okay. Gentlemen, is that how you wanted to wrap up this specific topic on the Cladomonas, Ryan Hardy? Taylor?
I'll just say that you start as a single sperm from your father and merge into a single cell from your mother. Human life begins as a single cell. So I guess we'll go on to geologic column.
Go ahead, Ken.
When it's my turn to reproduce, each cell of my body doesn't make babies. There's you have specific organs in your bodies, heart, lungs, appendix, etc. So Does the cladomonas do that? Does it actually develop? That's why I said, does it develop a uterus? Does it develop lungs? Does it develop a heart?
No, it develops some cells that reproduce and some cells that do not reproduce.
Well, we're beating a dead horse here, Donnie.
You can read this paper for yourself. I don't have to educate you live on air.
Okay, Kent, if you want to have a final word on that topic, since Taylor brought it up first and elaborated on it. Go ahead.
What we've seen is this algae has the amazing ability to cluster together to defend itself against a predator. Read the whole article, and you'll see that's what they introduced a predator, and they all cluster together in the presence of that predator. I think buffalo cluster together in the presence of a mountain lion. I think sheep do the same thing. It's brilliant strategy. Works good. I think humans do the same thing. Get together, make an army when somebody's attacking them. So that's not proof of evolution. I don't know how he ties this in, but yeah, we're beating a dead horse here. Let's go on to something else.
Okay, Taylor, what we have, and again, if there's something you'd like to respond to, we do have closing statements, Taylor, so maybe jot that down and you'll have time to leave no stone unturned. So we got time now for one final topic. I know you gentlemen were transitioning into the fossil record in the geologic column, but we don't necessarily have to go that route. We'll leave it up to you, Taylor, since you are in the affirmative. Pick the final topic or point, and then we'll go back and forth just a little bit on that.
Oh, tough decision between genetics and geologic column. I think we'll just go with genetics then. So let's see if Kent is prepared this time for endogenous retroviruses and other highly variable sequences in the DNA. I'm sure he knows the spiel. These are changes that can only have been inherited. They are not created. The likelihood of it being random is 1 in more, the number that's larger than the amount of atoms in the entire universe. So that's proof of evolution right there.
Okay, Taylor, thank you for introducing the ERV topic. Kent, we'll give you equal time to respond. Go ahead.
I'm pretty baffled. He threw a bunch of numbers up on screen, and that's proof of a bunch of zeros up on screen. That's proof of evolution. Well, the ERVs are finding out that they do have a very distinct function. They're not, and the word virus throws people off thinking it's bad. They're necessary, okay? Let's see. Many bacteria help us. Not all viruses are bad. We know, let's see, there are beneficial viruses present in our gut, let's see, and blood, skin and blood that can kill undesirable bacteria and more dangerous viruses. In our oceans, there are 10 billion times more bacteria than there are stars in the universe. The millions of viruses in the world laid end to end would stretch for 100 million light years. Whoa. Microorganisms living harmlessly on and in our bodies outnumber human cells 10 to 1. Viral genome hits junk hits the trash. Evolutionists have long claimed human chromosomes are infected with many different viruses over millions of years. As some of these sections of virus-like DNA were shown to be functional, evolutionists claimed they had become tamed. It's not junk DNA. So the ERVs, endogenous retroviruses, are abundant in mammals. The ERV sequences initially got their name because they showed strong sequence similarity to known viruses. Evolutionists proclaimed the animal genome evolved to the present state. It's called DNA junk. We're finding out there isn't any. It's all useful, not all of it, but so far the studies have shown it's beneficial. So if there are similarities, if there are viruses, we are a degenerate human race. We've been around for 6,000 years. We are copies off of copies off of copies off of copies off of copies. It's natural that things would degenerate, especially a complex code like that. If you make a copy of a code, take a Microsoft Word program, copy the program, then copy the copy of the program, then copy the copy. Randall, how many generations does it do that before it's gone? Not many, and it's gone. But you are a copy of your parents and their grandparents. The code has been copied thousands of times and is still readable. That's amazing design. I don't have a problem praising God for his amazing design. So I'm sorry. ERVs play a key role in controlling immune responses. They initiate immune responses. They're involved with immune factor. I think if you study up a little bit on ERVs, you'd find out that's a lousy evidence for your theory of evolution. Much better evidence for designer. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Kent, thank you for that response. Taylor, let me just unmute you and go ahead with your response to that. We'll go back and forth a bit.
All right. So I never said that they were junk DNA, and in fact, they do have co-opted function. And we've actually injected human ERVs into mice, and their systems have co-opted that into a function. So we know that it's possible. We've also resurrected viruses from ERVs, so we know that some of them are in fact infections. So it's absolutely not design. Also, tons of ERVs are suppressed by methylation. So we know that the body is actually trying to get their functions to stop, so they are absolutely not created. So we know that they are infectious. They look exactly like infections. We know some of them are trying to be suppressed. And we know some of them are in fact viruses because we can convert them directly into viruses. So I'm repeating myself at this point. We know that at least some of them, and we have hundreds and hundreds of them shared between chimps and humans. We know some of them are absolutely not created. It's not possible.
Okay, Taylor, thank you very much. Let me unmute Kent. Kent, feel free to respond to Snake.
Okay, back in 2008, they said very clearly, the data suggests that ERVs may regulate human transcription on a large scale. Scientists identify new beneficial function of endogenous retroviruses, ERV, in immune response back in 2014. So for a long time, they've known that something Snake apparently doesn't know, these are not necessarily harmful. Now, as again, I said, the fact that we are a copy off a copy off a copy off a copy in a degenerate DNA code, it's amazing we can still walk and talk and think about it. So endogenous retroviruses play a critical role in the human body's immune defense against common bacteria. Let's see. That's the Southwestern Medical Center from 2014. Switching sides. Endogenous retroviruses, back in 2021, protect us from viral infections. Wow. That's, let's see. Long regarded as junk DNA, or genomic dark matter, endogenous retroviruses turned out to represent important components of the antiviral immune response. See, it's like many things in science. When they first discover something, they say, well, we don't know what it does, therefore we don't need it. Back in 1850, I think it was, there was a list of 180 vestigial organs you don't need anymore. You don't need your tonsils, you don't need your adenoids, you don't need your appendix. They've discovered a function for all of them. And so it's just a matter of lack of understanding of what it does. The fact that we have ERVs, and similar to the chimpanzee ERV, is evidence we both face the same world. We both have to breathe the same air, drink the same water, face the same common enemies. I think it's amazingly designed that it works out great. Go ahead.
Yeah, you didn't respond to a single thing that I just said. I even said that ERVs have functions. I don't know if you're not listening or you just don't have a response. So I did say ARVs have functions. I went over a couple of them. You didn't respond to anything I said. I said that we have resurrected viruses from some of them, confirming that some of them are viruses. And we've also inserted them into mice, confirming that it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be created just because it has a function. And I said that, so 3 points. This is the third one. And I said that many of these ERVs are suppressed, i.e. they are not read in the DNA through the process of methylation. So we know that some of these ERVs do not, they absolutely do not have a function, and they have a negative function, or they have a negative function on the humans because they are suppressed, not read. So respond to that, if you will.
Well, the fact that we know that they now, you appear that they now have a negative, a hammer can be used in a negative way. You can beat somebody on the head with it. It's also got a positive function to pound in a nail. So the fact that this ERV that they studied, some of them, they thought, wow, this has a negative response in the system. That wouldn't prove evolution. It could be something has gone bad, something's gone wrong, like using a hammer for the wrong purpose. But this I don't see how you put that as evidence for evolution. ERVs promote homeostatic and inflammatory responses. Science Direct had an article about that. Frontier, ERVs, HERVs, new role in cancer, from accused perpetrators to cheerful protectors. Wow, they're finding out they're not a perpetrator, they're a protector. I think there's more needs to be done. Beneficial functions of endogenous retroviruses.
We've established this.
What now?
We've established this.
Could it be that the rest of them used to have a beneficial function, and now they don't? Could they have gone wild, gone bad? That's not proof for evolution.
No, because some of them can be converted directly back into viruses. The reason a lot of them have beneficial functions is because because viruses within them, as separate organisms from ourselves, contain promoters within them. And so if they insert in certain genes, it can help express those genes better. So this is completely expected. I don't disagree with this, but there are some of them that absolutely do not have a function. So the reason that this proves evolution, the reason that you respond with it has a function, therefore it was created, is that it's impossible for us to not be related to things like apes, and we can do this for the entire all the kingdoms of life. The reason that it's impossible for us not to be related is because they were infections, which is why you're fighting so hard to prove they're not infections. But at least some of them we can prove are infections.
Okay. And Kent, before you respond, Taylor, I appreciate that. Why don't we give Kent the last word here? But Taylor, you get a closing statement. So whatever you'd like to respond to, feel free to respond to it in the closing statement if you think that's fair. I just want to make sure we have enough time for questions from the audience too. So Kent, go ahead. Feel free to respond.
Yeah. I think the word virus is throwing him off. He thinks the word virus automatically means bad. Some viruses are necessary and useful. And so I think the research has shown that, which I just did. But for him to say that because we have similar viruses in our body that apes have, just the DNA code for that one virus is more complex than the space shuttle. But to say because they're similar to the ones in ape, therefore we're related, that's where it's such a giant leap of faith. It's just as much evidence that there's a common designer, which he rejects. So I think he wants so badly for his evolution religion to be true that he'll take anything as evidence for evolution. And ERVs are not evidence for evolution. Go ahead.
Okay, Kent, thank you very much. Taylor and Kent, that was a fun back and forth discussion. We actually got over an hour, basically, of back and forth. And so lots of fun, some passion here and there, but overall, very engaging. So Kent and Taylor, we do have closing statements. Do you gentlemen think 3 minutes for closing statements is enough, or did you want 5? What do you think in light of all the points discussed during the closing statement? What would you like, Taylor?
I think probably 5 is good.
Okay, we'll go 5 whenever you're ready, Taylor. Floor is yours.
All right. So Kent did not respond at all to the fact that evolution follows the scientific method. The fact that we can actually predict things about the natural world means that it's scientific by definition. I won't bore you too much repeating myself with exactly how that works, but we know that it does work. As far as the geological column goes, we know the exact, we actually pretty much do have a video of life changing, because videos are images. We have fossils are also images, and we know the order that these fossils go in. We know the age of these fossils. If that's wrong, then the Earth would have melted due to accelerated nuclear decay. Don't mean to bring up a new topic, but we've talked about that before. You had no response to that either. It's not about wanting to believe in this, because there are all kinds of Christians who believe in evolution, and so it's not a religion for atheists. But you, however, you wish that it wasn't true. And I know you say all the time that you don't want to teach it in your schools, but this is actually false. Or you don't want to teach your religion in schools. And Well, before I get to that part, I suppose I will address a couple points made during the debate. Yeah, you guys have to admit that comparative anatomy is valid because you have to be able to do that for your arc story to work. It still doesn't work for other reasons, but that's a different debate. But you can't provide any limit to when we should stop using comparative anatomy. Comparative genomics proves that we are related because it's impossible for us to have randomly inserting viruses in the same locations as apes. And so you didn't understand that. You kept telling me that I don't understand that they have functions when I admitted that. You think I was being tripped up by a virus? No, I said that they can be co-opted for functions. And you also had no idea what you were talking about with the multicellularity. To address the one thing that you said at the end of that engagement, they do not cluster to protect themselves in the presence of predators. What they do is they mutate, and when you put in predators, the mutants that grow bodies survive better. So they're not disparate individuals coming together to make a cluster. Regarding the fact that you actually do want to push your religion in schools, I do have a little video here. And let me know if the audio's wait, hold on. I don't think I pressed share audio. Share screen, share tab audio. Okay.
Taylor, I'm going to pause your timer. I see it at the bottom of the screen, but if it is what I think it is, I don't want to risk the video getting flagged. Do you think we could save? I see what the video is, and I don't want the YouTube video getting flagged for what that point might result in conversation-wise. What are your thoughts? YouTube's pretty strict these days on some of these topics.
I want to play it, but it's up to you. I can quote it if you need to. I have it all written down.
What's the argument? Does it apply to biology and evolution?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Feel free to quote it rather than playing the video just to go ahead.
Okay, so how it applies to biology and evolution is because Kent is actually a eugenicist. He said in this video, among other things, he agreed that we should have the government execute people and should have the government.
Taylor, I'm going to stop you there because if you want to finish your closing statement, but I think this is kind of off topic and it is going to run the risk of getting flagged. So
of embarrassing.
Feel free to take your full 5 minutes, but let's not go this direction.
Well, it's kind of important,
but it doesn't really have anything to do with biology.
This is how I've decided to end, but yeah.
By getting into
he accused me of wanting evolution to be true when I know the opposite is true. He wants evolution to be false so he can push his religion and have the government enforce it and execute people based on that.
Wow.
That's one way to end a closing statement.
That's my reaction too.
Okay, there we go. 5 minutes. You got it in there, but okay. Appreciate it. We'll hand it to Kent. 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay, he said we can predict the there's many things left unanswered here. You can predict things based on evolution. I disagree. Okay, I predict cows will always make baby cows. When our sheep was pregnant up here about a couple of weeks ago, I predicted it was going to have a baby sheep, and it did, dead on. God said they bring forth after their kind. We just proved the Bible's true. Oh, they bring forth after their kind. You said all kinds of Christians who believe in evolution. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that. Tell them to give me a call. I'll straighten them out. Okay, they're wrong. Okay, depending on what you mean by evolution. If you mean macroevolution, then it's not observable. Variations within the kind, that's observable. You said, I don't want to teach my religion in schools, but you think that I do. I've said many times, I'm not requiring everybody to pay for my religion to be taught. I believe it's common sense to say, cows produce cows and dogs produce dogs, and that's all any farmer in the history of the world has ever seen. When you plant potatoes, you expect potatoes to grow. But you believe the potato and you have a common ancestor. Comparative anatomy, you said that's a valid evidence for evolution. I've said many times, even tonight, that's evidence of a common designer. The same guy designed them. Of course they're similar. Same people are designing the Hondas and the Insight and the, if they're still making it, I got a 03, and they still make the Insight. Love it, love that little car. So yes, there are similarities, but you've chosen to interpret the similarities as evidence for common ancestry, which is not common sense, it's not smart, it's not logical, it's certainly not science. I'll go back and say it again. Nobody has ever observed a dog produce a non-dog, or a cow produce a non-cow, or a pine tree produce a non-pine tree. There might be variations within that kind, but they're limited. They're still the same, obviously, observable to be the same kind. Now, same species, man has decided to classify animals and plants based upon, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I don't think the animals care how we classify them, okay? They don't care at all. They know if they're the same kind. We got all kinds of animals mixed together in our farm. The chickens are not the least bit interested in mating with the pigs. They look for another chicken, okay? The cows look for a cow. The horses look for a horse. Our tortoise looks for Mrs. Tortoise, and she ain't there. But he's in the middle of a bunch of other animals, shows no interest in him at all. He's looking for a Mrs. Tortoise. How does he know? His brain's about that big. The mosquitoes only look for other mosquitoes to mate with. They know what the kind is. Now, we may muddy the water by saying it's a different species now, or genus or family or whatever. It's still the same kind, and it's so observable. The Bible says in the last days, there would be scoffers who would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. I fear Taylor fits that exactly to a T. He's deliberately ignorant about God's creation and the flood that made the layers of the earth. The moon pulling the water up and down with the tide, called tidal pumping, brings the water in and out. It's the sideways movement of the water during the tidal changes that would make all the layers and strata. You need to watch my video number 6. We covered that in great detail. So I think you're ignorant of the creation. God said they'll bring forth after their kind. That's all that's ever happened. That's all we've ever seen. And there was a flood, and you're ignorant of that. And the Bible says they're also ignorant of the coming judgment. And I feel bad, Taylor. You're going to be judged by God one day, whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not. Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. I'd like to see you join the family of God. If you don't want to join, that's your business. All right. Thank you, Donnie.
Gentlemen, Taylor and Kent, thank you for the 5-minute closing statements on a very lively debate. So, okay, let's move into some audience questions now. And you're both no strangers to debate. So whoever the question is for, we'll make sure they get the last word, and that way we can move along smoothly. So we'll start right at the beginning. Question from beginning here. Jeremy Nolan. Question for Snake. Genetically, Shih Tzu is most closely related to wolves, but if used comparative anatomy, nobody would have predicted that. Is evolution comparative anatomy outdated science? Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, so comparative anatomy is not perfect, but that's why we use comparative anatomy and comparative genomics. But comparative anatomy can predict that the Shih Tzu is related to wolves. It can predict that German Shepherds are related to wolves. They're all part of the same doggishness. So when we have such similar anatomy, genetics can help us actually determine which is which. So related to similar design or similar parts, that's absolutely false, because there's a marsupial mole, which is not related to any of the other mole species, and it has, you guessed it, different genetics. So the same designer is using different parts to make the same thing. And so this pattern that Kent puts forth does not hold. The pattern of comparative genomics and comparative anatomy does hold. It can actually predict things in the fossil record. Again, it's not perfect, but that's why we add things to it. We do comparative anatomy along with comparative genomics. That doesn't mean that it's not science, because Newtonian physics isn't perfect either, but it's still science, and we constantly add and tweak to it.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. Kent, floor is yours.
Oh, I think comparative anatomy is certainly science. It's okay to compare these, but it's the conclusions you draw from that where you go way outside of science. We see similar bone structures. We notice, look, red fox, sunflower, porcupine, artichoke all have 34 chromosomes. So, my car has 4 tires, so does the truck. Wow. I don't know how you don't get it, but yes, comparing things is interesting. The animals don't care, okay? The porcupines only look for other porcupines to mate with. They don't care. They don't try to mate with the sunflowers at all, okay? No interest. So the similarities is, I think, just as much evidence of a common designer. You've chosen to believe otherwise. I think you'll regret that one day, but that's your choice. 46 chromosomes. Wow. A crustacean has 46 chromosomes. Look at that. Are we related? No, it's a coincidence. It's the amount of gene code required to do that. So I think any dog breeder will tell you, most of the dogs we've created over the years would not survive in the wild. And there's a limit. They're never going to get a dog as big as Texas or as small as a flea. So I stand by my ground. The Bible says many times, 24 times in the first 7 chapters, they will bring forth after their kind. Those are the same kind of animal. That banana does not belong in this group. They can't interbreed, they can't interbreed, they can't, or they can. Oh, they can't, and they can't. So I try to keep it simple. Bananas are not part of the dog kind. They're part of the banana kind. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Taylor, you get the last word.
Yeah, so we have Kent threatening my eternal soul if I don't agree with him. So yeah, evolution doesn't do that. That's one reason it's not a religion. And he wants the government to unalive people. So this is why combating creationism is so important and not letting his religion have any power. Anyway, so we don't compare things based on a single trait. If you've actually ever read a paleontology paper, they compare hundreds of traits. That slide I showed earlier where the creationist organizations were using comparative anatomy to figure out fossil snakes. All they had was jaw fragments and little tiny vertebral fragments. And yet they were able to, the creationists accepted this conclusion that they were in fact snakes based on these tons of little features. It's not just, oh, it had a jaw, therefore they're related. There are tons of features and we figure out how closely related they are. So it's not just one little feature. I don't know why you keep bringing up they have the same number of chromosomes, therefore that's not how it works.
Okay, Taylor, thank you for the final word. All right, let's see. Creationist Crybaby, one of Kent's biggest fans. So CC is asking Kent, how do you explain that scientists get essentially the same tree of life, whether they look at morphological, biochemical, or genetic traits?
The question has obviously a built-in assumption. Do they get the same tree of life? Okay. If they do, maybe they'll have to go to the same school and face the same teachers and flunk out if they don't give the same answer. Maybe there's a propaganda campaign going here. And Taylor, I didn't threaten you. God did. I just am the messenger boy delivering the message. You're going to face God one day. Don't blame me. I didn't threaten you. I'm telling you what God said. You can ignore it if you want. Okay.
Thank you, Kent. Taylor, over to you.
Yeah, so this is called cross confirmation. It's something that happens in science when multiple different methods converge on the exact same conclusion. That is science. It's not just all of these. It's the other things that confirm the age of the Earth, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, we get basically the same traits, trees from genetic comparative genomics as we do from comparative anatomy. Though the one thing comparative genomics helps us with is like the really fine details, like which mice are more closely related. But in general, comparative anatomy is best for the like broad picture things. But they create the same nested hierarchies. It's not possible for these to come to the same conclusion if they're wrong, if these methods are wrong. They would, it's like anything else. If our measurements of decay were all wrong, they wouldn't all come to the same number.
Taylor, appreciate it. Kent, you get the last word. Question was for you this time.
That's wishful thinking. And if Crybaby needs some toilet paper to blow his nose, I got some right here. Tell him, give me a call. Come visit Dinosaur Adventureland. So the fact that scientists get essentially the same family tree is not proof of anything, okay? Again, it could be proof that they're all being brainwashed by the same. All the Nazis believe the same thing. Wow, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed are superior race. Yeah, they all believe that. That proves something, doesn't it? So that's silly to use as logic, okay, to support your theory. I think the Bible says they bring forth after their kind. I think all observation would say that's what we observe. Every farmer in the history of the world, every farmer from every country in the world will tell you cows produce cows without exception. Variations happen, but they're limited. Most would not survive in nature, but they're still obviously a cow. Is there anything that's obviously not a dog that you know came from a dog? No. You never see this happen. You imagine it happened in a fossil long ago and far away. That's not science. It's a religion, but we're beating a dead horse here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent, for the final word. Okay, next question is for Snake. Many animals share homologous structures, but where did the new information come from to make those structures evolve in the first place?
From mutations. So we know that the size, shape, orientation, location, number, and other features of bones, for example, and all tissues, change from parent to child. So the new information comes from the fact that the child's genetics is different. So we know bones can elongate. It comes from mutation or recombination, basically, because you can't really consider having the genetics from both parents combining. That's not really a mutation, but that's how the parents' genes would change. The child's genes are different from the parents because the child has some genes from each parent. I don't know how better to answer this. We know that the features of bones can change, and it's due to those two processes. And it's not like you get a whole new gene. It's just a small mutation can affect just having the regulation of a certain protein, which might make some features smaller or larger. And like with the mustard flower, for example, if the roots are made larger, you get a turnip. If the leaves are made larger, then you get lettuce and cabbage and things like that. And if the flowers get smaller and more numerous, then you get broccoli. I don't know if you've ever picked open the little florets on broccoli, but they're yellow inside because they come from mustard plants. But so if you change features that are already there, you can get new features.
Taylor, thank you for the response. Kent, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Taylor, for the question. Excellent. Come visit Dinosaur Adventureland again and keep up the good work with your channel. We have a classic example here of Snake not answering the question at all. The question was, how did they evolve in the first place? Saying that a bone can elongate and you can emphasize the flower of a mustard plant or the root of the mustard plant. Where did it get the root? Where did it get the flower? You didn't answer the question at all. Okay, you get the last word on this, but this chart that kids are taught from in school shows a protozoa turning into a human, gradually evolving over millions of generations. Protozoa don't have bones at all. Protozoa don't have a lot of things. They don't have eyes like humans have. They don't have ears. There's a lot of features that we have that they don't have at all. So you got to get completely, not elongating a bone. They don't have a bone to elongate. How did the features originate? Taylor would like to know, how did they evolve in the first place? Taylor, they didn't. God made them.
Appreciate it, Kent. Snake, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Okay, so if the question is about how the origin of those structures at all, we also have good evidence on that too. So I answered the question, but perhaps I should give different examples. So where did the information to make bones come from? Well, we know cells already have calcium in them. We know they can concentrate calcium in certain places. And we have examples of animals that have calcium deposits. We have like things like sponges or corals that have calcium deposits. There are worms and fish that have very small calcium deposits. The earliest fish started off with calcium deposits in their mouths, which made it easier to eat things. Those became teeth, which became jaws, and the jaws became supports for gills. And so we see these transitions throughout the fossil record. I see you looking at a certain species of sponge, but some of them do in fact have calcium deposits, especially corals. So if you have duplicate, we know bones duplicate. We have pigs that you can breed to have extra sets of ribs and extra sets of vertebra. So we also see in the fossil record fish with jaw bones that duplicate, and when they duplicate, it goes down. So that's the origin of ribs. So that's the origin of bones. We know bones can change size, shape, orientation, location, etc. And we observe this today.
Okay, Snake, thank you for the final word. Next one comes in from one of your best friends and biggest fans, Taylor. Bubblegum Gun, $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Bubblegum Snake. What is the probability of life forming through random chance? If you appeal to the improbability argument to ERV, then you admit life was created.
Nope. You just don't understand how probability works. So the ERV thing is actually truly random because there's millions of different sites the ERVs can insert into. The formation of life is not random at all. So it depends on what you're asking. Most creationists don't understand at all. They think that the probability of life forming as it is right now, just from random molecules coming together, it's even worse than the ERV probabilities, because that's not how it works. But we've shown that the probability for pieces of life forming in natural Earth conditions is in fact 100%. So we're trying to figure out the probability of very simple life forms forming is. We don't know that. Well, assuming that assuming other scientific knowledge, like the fact that there was life one day and then the next day there was only single-celled life, it got there somehow. There's no reason to think it was a god. There are tons of scientific reasons to think that it was a biogenesis, because we have figured out many parts of that puzzle. So just by sheer amount of evidence, that wins the scientific contest.
Okay, Taylor, thank you so much. Kent, the floor is yours if you had a response.
The probability of life forming through random chance is 0. Didn't happen. It was designed. The probability of this forming by random chance is 0. The probability of this forming by random chance, a piece of paper with code words on it that mean something, is 0. It had to have a designer. I don't know how you guys can't see it. The Bible says they're willingly ignorant, and God gave up on them. God gave up. So it's sad, but what do you say? So it didn't happen. Through is misspelled, by the way. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Kent. Quick final word, Snake, before we move on.
So we have constant insertion of his religion, but he refuses to defend it because he knows that the standards he establishes for his myths prove that comparative anatomy is actually scientific. he's never witnessed God creating, yet he's sitting there saying it happened for a fact. So how are we supposed to figure out what happened when something was never witnessed? Well, through scientific predictions, making evolution scientific. But yeah, the probability of life forming, it's not random. The laws of chemistry are not random. They're highly ordered, and we've gotten very close to creating, to watching living cells form in the lab. There's an experiment called Jiwanu, which actually were able to grow and replicate and metabolize, but they contain no genetic information. So there's a lot of information on this, tons of pieces of the puzzle. There's a lot of parts of cells can form naturally, and we've observed absolutely zero intelligent creation. So science wins.
Okay, next question is for Kent from Pitch Lumen. Kent, do you think plant foods were our original food source in the garden, and why?
Well, certainly that's what the Bible teaches. God told Adam and Eve to eat the fruit, the vegetables, and the seeds. And later, after the flood was over, God told Noah, now you can eat meat, and the animals are going to be afraid of you. But in the original creation, they were told to eat plants, fruit, vegetables, and seeds. But again, I'm not requiring that to be taught in all the school systems. That is what the Bible says. I believe that's true. It's certainly logical. And changing from a plant-eating lion to a meat-eating lion is a pretty minor change compared to going from a rock to a lion, which is what Tyler believed. So yes, my answer is I think plants were the original food. Plants are able to reach into the ground and pull up minerals, vital minerals, vitamins. Our body's made of minerals. We're made from the dust of the ground. We use up some of those minerals. You got to keep replacing them. That's why plants are the ideal source to do that. They can get minerals out of the ground. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Snake, if there's anything you'd like to add, floor is yours.
Yeah, you actually do want schools to adopt your religion. I couldn't play the video of you saying that God's laws should be enforced by our government. So another lie from you. As far as plants being the original food source in the garden, that's not possible. There are several organisms who are dependent on a parasitic relationship in order to reproduce. So either that means that they were killing organisms to survive in the garden, or it means that they evolved highly complex traits post-garden. Neither of those options are good for you.
Okay, thank you, Snake. Kent, you get the last word. This question was for you this time.
Well, I think I answered that good enough. I'd like to go back to a previous question, give my last word. He said they're very close to creating life in the laboratory, and there's zero intelligence. I agree. Those scientists have zero intelligence if they believe it could happen by chance.
Okay, thank you for that last word. Super chat comes in from DeFreak. Thank you so much for the support. He says this debate was worth the price of admission. So apparently people were entertained and enjoyed this. So we're going to have to start wrapping it up with one or two more questions as time has flown by, and I want to respect the guests' time for tonight. So this one comes in from Echoing Erudite. Question for Snake. How is good science possible for evolutionary theory where observation isn't possible? Isn't making unprovable inferences the same as religious belief?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were going to unmute me or not. Yeah, so as stated multiple times, for science to be science, you don't have to have like a video of it happening. We can have science based on things that we can't see with our physical eyes, like the science of electrons, germ theory. You've never seen a virus enter a cell and replicate inside of it. Yet we can predict what's going to happen if we inject someone with one virus or who's sick with something that the Bible says is just demons. We can take their blood, put it in another person or a mouse, and all of a sudden they'll become sick. And we can predict, okay, well, if they're actually particles or bacteria, viral particles or bacteria, then we can grow it on a medium, or we can grow it en masse and sequence its genes, and we can find that there are in fact different genes. Or look at this, we can't see them, but we can grow something that's in their blood. With electrons, we've never seen an electron, and yet we accept that it's actually a valid scientific theory because we can make predictions about what color a certain compound is going to be. It's actually a lower level chemistry. We have to calculate based on how many electrons are in the atom, what color it's going to have. We can predict what chemicals are going to bond with other chemicals. We can make those predictions based on things that we cannot actually observe. We observe the results. We have the theory. This is how I think it works. I can actually get something out of this theory of how it works. If I can predict how something works, that means I know how it works. We do this with evolution. I can sit there and say we see things change in real time. We can see information building from mutations in real time. And we can predict, I'm going to guess that animals used to look this way, and I'm going to predict that it used to look this way between this animal and this animal. And we can find new body plans or mixes of different body plans. So therefore it's science. Kent hasn't contended with this the entire debate.
Okay, Snake, thanks for the response. Kent, floor is yours.
Body plans. I think plans involves a planner, but that's okay. Science means comes from the Latin word "ser," knowledge. What do we know? We know dogs produce dogs. I would predict that if you go back in time, we can't, but if you could go back in time, you'd find they always were dogs or looking similar to a dog. But you want to go back in time and turn them into a protozoa. That's not science. Now, religions attempt to understand, explain the world, but religion is not considered science. Evolution is a religion and is not a science. You believe a protozoa is the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents of everything alive today. That's what the kids are taught. That's what the charts show. Science is knowledge gained through study or practice. They've been studying and practicing for a long time. Farmers have. Cows making cows and corn growing corn, and that's all we've ever seen. That would be science. But to say that, and by the way, questioning science is science. I think you should question what you've been taught. You've been taught that you're related to a protozoa and a bacteria and a strawberry. That's not science. It's not observable. So, definition of science, knowledge gained through man's accumulated through observation, experimentation, and testing. That's what all the definitions of science are. Find the words evolution, species. Best evidence we know of for any animal turning to a different kind. There is none. There's no evidence. Nobody's ever seen this. We see creatures with a very short lifespan, bacteria, 8 hours, get born, grow up, get married, have babies in 8 hours. You can have 3 generations in one day. One scientist over a 50-year period could watch probably over 1 million generations, and they're still making bacteria. But you believe, by faith, that that bacteria could turn to a whale. I feel sorry for you. Go ahead.
Nope, there are no evolutionary scientists who propose that bacteria evolved into whales. None. So science means to know. Well, what do we know? First of all, that's the etymological fallacy. You can't really use the etymology of a word to define it. The way the process of science, how we use the word today, as I've cited multiple times, involves gaining knowledge through, as you said, study and practice, and of course, making predictions. You completely ignored that this time as well because you can't address it. Predictions based on theories and hypotheses. If I can predict how something works, then I know how it works. You haven't addressed that. You can't address that. Evolution does that. It's science. Creationism does not do that. It's not science. It's that simple.
Okay, Taylor, Kent, that wraps up the debate. That wraps up the audience Q&A. To the audience, thank you so much for being so engaged. We've had a great audience. And also thanks for all the excellent questions. Taylor and Kent, let's have some really quick final cordial words for each other as we wrap this up completely. So Taylor, let's start with you. Thanks again for doing this. Some final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and this was a fun debate, and yeah, let's get more of them on the books.
All right. Well, we are debate addicts on this channel, so we're always up for more debates, and we've got plenty more scheduled with you, Kent, and also with you, Taylor. You've got a few coming up with Jamie next week on Cladamonis, as well as debates with Nephilim Free and Professor David McQueen. So it should be fun. Kent, lots of debates coming up for you as well. Final words, final thoughts, and thank you for giving us 2 hours of your time.
I go first or Taylor?
Nope. Kent, well, Taylor was brief there, gave his final words.
Okay.
Kent,
Right.
now you get yours.
I don't have a problem looking at things in nature and just being amazed. God, you're a great designer. I can see a big house and say, wow, but it's a good carpenter. I can see a ship on the sea and say, wow, this was a great mariner who built this thing. I don't have a problem giving God the glory for the creation. To believe that all these things we see came about by blind chance. Nobody designed
This is
any
something
of them.
that all
It's dumb. If you can't look at that and say, wow, somebody designed these things, I guess I like studying nature. I study the very same nature and come to the opposite conclusion. God designed everything. But you think all these creatures, all these life forms came from a rock. I don't understand who taught you that and why you believed it, but you did. There's no intelligent life down here, Scotty. Beam me up. Ronnie, I marvel. I've debated many evolutionists, and I can't understand how they can look at nature and study it and say, nobody made it. I praise God for his wonderful creation. Thank you, Lord. Go ahead.
Well,
Well,
were we supposed to make another closing argument?
Go ahead, have some
Kidding.
quick.
No, it's fine.
Well, you guys always make for a fun debate. One of our very first debates, we've hosted almost 300 debates now in 4 years. And I think it was our first or second formal debate 4 years ago. You know who was between? Snake and Kent. So these guys are best buds. And thank you for doing 10 debates with each other. So with that, we're going to wrap things up. I'll be back to the audience. I'll be back in about 30 seconds for some brief announcements and reminders. Stand for Truth is out. God bless.
This is something that almost no Christian that you talk to seems to understand about how our criminal justice system is completely unbiblical. And that...
Brother,
go ahead.
I am so embarrassed that it took me 40 years as a Christian reading my Bible to come to that same conclusion. We're doing it totally the wrong way. Our system is completely unbiblical. I think there must be something like a mean gene, something in the genetic code that makes animals vicious or mean. But I think there is something in the genetic code that deals with the disposition toward gentleness or meanness. And I think in God's perfect law, if we would continually execute people that do see certain crimes, we would gradually get a much better society that not so many people have this mean gene in them.
What about where the Bible says that adulterers should be put to death, homosexuals, or those who commit bestiality and things like that?
Absolutely, yes. And witchcraft. Those, according to the Bible, are death sentences. If indeed adulterers were executed, very quickly society would be much more calm and I'm not saying we should do it. I'm just saying we should look at the biblical pattern.
Right, it's the government that should do it. We're not saying that Christians or churches should be carrying out these sentences. We're talking about a pattern for criminal justice in America that's based on the Bible. Is that right?
Exactly correct.